Hello, hello. Welcome to Story Time with the Fairy Doctor. The Fairy Doctor is in. Tell me what ails you, and I'll tell you a tale. Or rather, because you are not here in person with me now, if you have arrived, then trust in the magic of synchronicity to bring you the story that you need. You are here because this is the tale that you need to hear today. Now, it is well known that the cunning folk, the healers, and who we would call perhaps witches today, the wise men and women of this land, would in fact learn much of their magic and medicine from the fair folk, our good neighbours, a Tolworth Teg here in Wales and Cymru. And, well, what better medicine is there than story? I myself have learned these tales from where the fair folk have led me, from whisperings in my ear, and from encounters in the woods and glens, and at the end of the garden. Well, I say the end of the garden, often it's the middle of the garden, because that's where the tree grew, where the stars would shine through, and the fair folk would sing to me. But let's leave that by the by, be it as it may. Welcome to my office here today. Now, in my doctor's bag, I in fact have medicinal yarns just for you. And these are no snake oil. No, these are pure, unadulterated story magic. Let me reach within my bag and see which tale is calling to you today. Meeting the Quin in green. Medicine, mythic medicine from Elfame. Well, this story, in fact, comes from the borderlands of Scotland. And it has travelled down to us through a ballad, through a song. A song, well, is a marvellous way to remember anything that needs remembering. It is a marvellous piece of magic to share with those who listen. A song is a seed of a gift of inspiration. Many, many years ago, on the borders of England and Scotland, in that land between where there were many skirmishes, there was much conflict between the two countries, there was a forest, and there was a woman, a young lass, in fact, named Janet. Janet, well, she liked to roam, and she turned to her father in his court one day, for he was quite well-to-do. And she said, "Father, I would like to go into the forest. I would like to explore the woodland on our land." And he said, "Janet, don't you dare, my love. All the maidens of my court are forbidden from entering into that deep, dark forest. For there, Tam Lin does live." A hush fell over the court, and Janet curled her hair between her fingers, the wispy bits that had escaped her braid, and she tucked it back. Its deep auburn, deeper still, glinting red in the sunlight. "Yes, Papa," she said, and off she went, to walk the lands, to walk into the woods. She hitched her skirt up above her knee and in through the trees she snuck. Green it was, the leaves, the land, green it was, her dress, in fact, for though she'd been told many a time that she should not wear the colour of the fair folk, Janet never listened. Deep into the woods she walked, she wandered, she heard the bird song, she saw the bright blue bluebells blooming. She felt the sunlight green upon her skin through the dappled leaves. Every now and then there'd be a rustle of some animal or other, a rabbit, perhaps a small deer. And for a moment she thought perhaps there were boar in here, and that may have been a riskier move than she would have liked. But Janet continued on, deep, deep into the woods. For this land was her family land. These woods were her family's woods, and these woods, therefore, were hers. In the centre of the forest a glade opened up around her, and she found the most beautiful rose bush growing. The sunlight pierced through the branches of the trees and bloomed in the blossoms of the roses. The roses were a little early, she thought, but they were beautiful. And in fact, as she looked at the bush of roses, she saw one was a double rose, two nested inside each other. It was such a marvel. She looked again, and there was another and another. All of the roses on this rose bush were double roses. And so she reached forward and plucked a double rose from the rose bush in the glade in the centre of the woods. She plucked another, and as she was reaching for the third, a voice behind her. "Lady, lady, what do you do there?" She spun round, and there was the most handsome man she had ever seen, dressed like her, in green. "Oh, kind sir," she curtsied, "I just thought these were so beautiful that I must take them home with me." He stepped forward, his fingertips gentle as he cupped her face. "You too are beautiful. Won't you stay a while with me?" When Janet made her way home, the sun was setting. Her dress was muddied. She let it down beneath her knee, and her cheeks were flushed red. She had had the most marvellous afternoon, and the roses clutched in her hand, placed in a vase by her bed that night, were the sweetest reminder of two nestling together. The days passed, and Janet was in somewhat of a daydream. The weeks passed, and she began to grow pale and look a little green about the gills herself, and her father knew exactly what this was. "Janet," he said, "come to me." She stood before him. "Janet, if I am not very much mistaken, you are with child." The court gasped in unison, and Janet laughed and shook her head and said, "If I were with child, well, a miracle that would be. For that child, that babe, would not belong to any man here in this court or in this fair country." But the weeks continued on, and she could not deny the signs growing, and so she went back into the forest, back into the woodland, back deep, deep through the woods, through the trees, into the glade, the glen in the centre of the forest where the roses grew. And there she waited. There she called out, my love, where are you?" There she began to look for the herbs that would save her from this misfortune and dishonor. As she found them, as she reached for them, the man appeared again. my lady, what do you do?" And she said, "Well, as you can see, my love, our one night together, our one afternoon together, has left me in somewhat of a pickle." "Well," he said, "this will not do. You cannot have a child with no father." And she said, "No, of course not. But please tell me, dear gentleman, you who wear the green of the fair folk." And he smiled and indicated that she did too, and she looked somewhat chagrined. And he said, "Yes." She said, "Are you human, or are you one of them?" And he said, "Dear, sweet Janet, I am human like yourself. I am Tam Lin." And she gasped and widened her eyes and said, "But Tam Lin is..." And he said, "No, I am mortal like yourself. And 7 years ago I was riding with my father when I fell from my horse in these very woods, and the Fairy Queen herself swept me up and took me to her court. And I have had a fine life there. Fed well, wine delicious. And the ladies, well, none of course could compare to you, but they have been in their own way very sweet." A swift save there by Tam Lin. "But," he said, "I have heard whisperings, I have heard it said throughout the court that every 7 years the Queen must pay a tithe to the devil himself, and I am so fair and full of flesh that I fear it will be myself. So will you help me, Janet dear, for I am the father of your child?" And she said, of course, my love, Tam Lin, of course I will help you." And he told her exactly what to do, when and where to wait on a dark, dark night at Miles Cross, a crossroads and a bridge all in one. She waited, hidden in a deep, dark cloak, carrying another, and she heard the fairy ride draw near, hoofbeats thundering on the ground. The wild hunt itself was coming. The hounds howled through the woods, the wind whipped the leaves on the trees, and the horses rode past. And she did as her love had told her. She let past first the black horse, then the brown horse. Then, as the white horse came nearby, she stepped from the shadows and she grabbed the rider and pulled him down. In her arms she held him tight. She did not recognize him, but she knew him. She held him close. And the Fairy Queen saw what had happened, saw that she had pulled Tam Lin from his horse, and in Janet's arms the Queen turned him into a hissing snake, writhing and wriggling, and Janet held him tight. The Queen turned him into a roaring lion, all sharp claws and teeth, and still she held him close, knowing he could not hurt her, for she carried his child. And in her arms, the Queen turned him into a red-hot iron bar. No fair one could hold it. No human should be able to hold that heat, but Janet held it tight, knowing that that burning would pass. It would not harm her. Tam Lin would not harm her, for he had given his word. And finally, Janet held that iron so tight that the Queen turned it into a small, naked babe. Janet quickly took the second cloak, wrapped it round the babe, and placed it behind her. A moment passed. She heard a noise, and a hand rested on her shoulder. She turned to see her own true love, Tam Lin, dressed as she had first seen him, but with the cloak over his head. The Queen was furious. She dismounted from her horse and roared with anger. Janet had stolen from her. And to the pair, she cried out her rage. If I had known what would come to pass on this night, Tam Lin, I would have taken both your eyes, replaced them with eyes of stone, and turned you to a tree, that you could not betray me. Now let me never set eyes on either one of you again in my home, or you will be so. The lovers ran, and the wild hunt rode on. Janet and Tam Lin were wed the next spring, with their babe, who grew up big and strong, and who never wore green in the woods. Thank you. I love this story paired with Thomas the Rhymer, where the Queen of Elfhame shows a kinder face. She invites Thomas to come and join her, but he must keep silent for 7 years. And he does. And so when he does, he is rewarded and returned to his home. Tam Lin, however, heard the rumours and let fear get the better of him. And so, before his time was complete, he found a way to escape. But that in itself came rather than with a payment, with a gift, with magic of its own. It came with a warning, a punishment, a taboo. And here in these two pieces, these two tales, these two ballads, we find that dual nature of the other world, of the spirit world, and of our own lives as living, magical beings. When we step into an agreement, we have a choice. We have a choice to finish it out. We have a choice to stay true to our words, like true Thomas, or to let fear of the unknown, what will happen when our time is complete, what will happen when our deal is done, get the better of us, like Tam Lin. Of course, many will say that there is a moral here about Janet disobeying her father, but she is the heroine in our tale, for she rescues the young lad from his fears. She rescues her lover and the father of her child by doing as he asked, by entering into an agreement and completing it. She holds tight despite the fear. And so she wins a husband that she already loves. Here are those tales, those pieces. So often it is in the stories that we learn about the fair folk and about our dealings with them, that when we break the rules that they have given us, when we break our words, we lose what we might have gained, and we lose that friendship. And this runs deep within magic. In the old grimoires, you make pacts, deals with spirits, and they help you, and you help them. And often these would be to help your community, to help your family, beneficial for all involved, if you remember those two stories. The tale of Thomas, who keeps his word, and the tale of Tam Lin, who does not. Was he going to be given to the devil? Unlikely. But since he believed it was so, he made the devil, in the angry fairy queen, a real figure in his life. And so I promised medicine, magic, your prescription. Let me take up my quill and my prescription pad. For you, say one true thing before breakfast each day for 1 lunar month. Here you go. Try it and see what happens. Thank you for joining me and for being so brave at the doctors today. Grant yourself a gold star or a lollipop in your favourite flavour, and I will see you here again next month for more tales with the Fairy Doctor. Until then, the Fairy Doctor is out, my office is closed, and I wish you all a very enchanted life. Like, comment, subscribe, share with a friend who needs to hear this tale, and come and join me in the Enchanted Academy, link below, of course, to discuss this story and learn to tell your own. Happy truth-telling.